We all seem to agree on one thing. The human brain is the best thing ever. It's evolution's masterpiece. It's the top of the pyramid, the thing that separates us from the animals. Our intelligence is our superpower. It let us conquer the planet. We built cities, we wrote symphonies, we went to the moon. All because of this 3-pound lump of wrinkled tissue between our ears. We celebrate it. We're proud of it. The story we tell ourselves is a straight line upwards, from dumb ape to smart human. A story of inevitable progress, with the big brain as the hero. But what if that story is wrong? What if the big brain isn't a prize? What if it's a trap, a curse, an evolutionary flaw that we're only now beginning to understand? What if this thing we're so proud of is actually a massive liability, a high-stakes gamble that could easily end in total failure? It's not a popular idea. It goes against everything we believe about ourselves. But the evidence is all around us if we're willing to look. Evolution doesn't think in terms of good or bad. It only thinks in terms of what works, what helps a creature survive and reproduce in its environment. And what works is always a trade-off. You gain one thing, you lose another. A bird gets wings to fly, but its bones have to be hollow and light, making them fragile. A cheetah gets incredible speed, but it can only maintain it for a few seconds before overheating. Every advantage comes with a cost. So what's the cost of a big brain? It's a lot higher than you think. Let's start with the basics. The purely physical, biological costs. Your brain is incredibly expensive. It's a gas guzzler. It makes up only about 2% of your body weight, but it burns through 20% of your daily calories. Or just to keep it running, even when you're resting, watching TV, doing nothing. That's an insane amount of energy. For most of human history, calories were scarce. Every bit of energy counted. Getting enough food was a full-time job, and our ancestors were spending a fifth of their hard-earned energy just to power this one organ. Think about that from an evolutionary perspective. That's energy that isn't going to building strong muscles. It's not going to a powerful immune system. It's not going to storing fat for lean times. It's not going to reproduction. It's all being diverted to the head. This makes us physically weaker than our primate relatives. A chimpanzee, pound for pound, is much stronger than a human. They didn't waste their calories on a giant thinking machine. They spent it on muscle. From a purely survival standpoint, in a physical fight with a predator, our big brain is useless. You can't think your way out of a lion's jaws. You need to run or fight. And we're not great at either, compared to other animals. We bet everything on this one strange adaptation. We became physically mediocre to fuel a supercomputer in our skulls. It was a huge, risky gamble. And the costs don't stop there. They start before we're even born. The big brain has a direct and brutal consequence for human childbirth. It's called the obstetric dilemma. Our heads are huge, especially a baby's head relative to its body. But we also evolved to walk upright on 2 legs. To do that efficiently, our pelvis had to become narrower. So you have a very big object, the baby's head, trying to pass through a very narrow passage, the mother's birth canal. The result is that human childbirth is uniquely difficult, painful, and dangerous. For most of history, it was a leading cause of death for women. Even today, with all our modern medicine, it's a major medical event. Compare that to almost any other mammal. A foal is born, and within an hour, it's standing and running. A kitten is born with relative ease. For humans, it's a life-threatening ordeal. An evolution's solution to this dilemma is a messy compromise. Human babies are born prematurely. Their brains are nowhere near fully developed. If they stayed in the womb any longer, their heads would get too big to ever get out. So they're born incredibly helpless. A human infant is a useless creature. It can't walk. It can't cling to its mother. It can't find food. It can't regulate its own body temperature. It is completely and utterly dependent on its parents for years. This is a direct result of our big brains. This extended childhood is another massive cost. It takes roughly 2 decades for a human brain to fully mature. 2 decades of vulnerability. 2 decades of needing constant care, protection, and feeding. This is an enormous investment for the parents and for the social group. While that foal is off grazing on its own, a human child is still learning basic motor skills. This long period of dependency puts a huge strain on resources. It means parents can have fewer offspring over their lifetime. It ties the family unit together out of sheer necessity, but it also makes the whole operation incredibly fragile. If something happens to the parents, the child is unlikely to survive. Our intelligence created a system where our own young are helpless for longer than any other creature. It's a huge vulnerability. So, just on a physical level, we have an organ that drains our energy, makes us physically weak, causes a dangerous childbirth, and results in a long and vulnerable childhood. If you were an engineer designing a species to survive, you would probably not choose this path. It seems inefficient and needlessly risky. The benefits had to be enormous to outweigh these fundamental life or death costs. And they were. The brain allowed us to make tools, to control fire, to cooperate in complex ways, to develop language. It allowed us to outthink our problems, instead of just outmuscling them. It worked. It allowed us to spread across the globe and dominate every environment, but the costs never went away. They are baked into our biology. But the physical costs are only half the story. The other half, the part we talk about less, are the psychological costs. This is where the idea of the brain as a flaw becomes even more convincing. The same cognitive machinery that lets us plan for the future also creates anxiety. A squirrel doesn't lie awake at night worrying about whether it has stored enough nuts for the winter. It just follows its instincts. It lives in the present moment. We don't. Our brain is a time machine. It can remember the past in vivid detail, and it can project itself into the future, imagining countless possibilities. This is great for inventing a new tool or planning a hunt, but it's also the source of endless worry. We worry about things that haven't happened. We fret about things that might happen. We create elaborate disaster scenarios in our heads. We fear death. We are aware of our own mortality in a way no other animal is. A dog doesn't have an existential crisis. A cow doesn't ponder the meaning of its existence. We do. This consciousness, this self-awareness is a heavy burden. It creates a baseline level of psychological noise and stress that other animals are free from. Depression, anxiety disorders, existential dread. These are not just modern problems. They are the price we pay for being able to think about tomorrow. The brain that can imagine a paradise can also imagine a hell. And it often does. Furthermore, our brain isn't the clean, logical computer we imagine it to be. It's a messy, glitchy piece of hardware that was cobbled together over millions of years of evolution. It's full of shortcuts, biases, and irrational quirks. These are often called cognitive biases. And they were probably very useful for survival in a small tribal world. For example, confirmation bias. The tendency to favor information that confirms what we already believe. In a dangerous world, it might be better to stick with what you know and be suspicious of new things. Better to assume the rustle in the bushes is a lion, even if it's usually just the wind. Better safe than sorry. But in our modern complex world, these biases are a disaster. Confirmation bias leads us to get stuck in echo chambers, unable to listen to opposing views. It fuels political polarization and extremism. Another bias is our tendency for tribalism. Our brains are hardwired to quickly categorize people into us and them. In a world of small hunter-gatherer bands competing for resources, this was essential for survival. You had to trust your own group and be wary of strangers. But today, on a planet with 8 billion people, the same instinct leads to racism, nationalism, and war. We use our massive intelligence not to overcome this bias, but to create elaborate justifications for it. We invent ideologies and philosophies to explain why. Our group is superior and their group is a threat. Our smart brain becomes a servant to our most primitive, irrational instincts. It's a weapon we point at each other, and then there's the brain's capacity for self-deception. We are masters at lying to ourselves, at rationalizing our own bad behavior. We can hold two completely contradictory beliefs at the same time. This might be a defense mechanism, a way to protect our fragile egos from the harsh realities of the world and our own shortcomings. But it also prevents us from solving our problems. We see what we want to see. We believe what makes us feel good. We are brilliant at avoiding uncomfortable truths. This is not the behavior of a perfect, rational machine. It's the behavior of a flawed, emotional, and deeply biased organ that is trying to navigate a world it wasn't built for. This leads to a bigger problem. Our brain has created a world that it can no longer cope with. Our technology has advanced much faster than our wisdom. We have Stone Age brains living in a Space Age world. We evolved to live in small groups of a few dozen people, to eat natural foods, to be physically active. We now live in anonymous cities of millions. We eat highly processed junk food. We sit in chairs all day, staring at screens. This mismatch between our evolved nature and our current environment is the source of many of our modern plagues. Obesity, diabetes, heart disease, but also social alienation, loneliness, and the mental health crisis. Our brains crave real social connection, But we try to satisfy that with the empty calories of social media. Our bodies crave movement, but we live sedentary lives. We have used our intelligence to build a cage for ourselves. A comfortable cage, perhaps, but a cage nonetheless, and it's making us sick and unhappy. The brain's ability to create complex systems is now backfiring. We've built economic systems so intricate that no one truly understands them. We've created global supply chains so fragile that a single disruption can cause chaos. We've developed information networks that spread misinformation and propaganda at the speed of light, overwhelming our brain's ability to tell fact from fiction. Our intelligence has given us the power to create systems that are beyond our own control. We are like the sorcerer's apprentice, unleashing forces we cannot manage. The very tool that gave us control over nature is now causing us to lose control of our own creations. This all builds to the ultimate potential flaw, the one that could render all the brain's other achievements meaningless. Our intelligence has given us the power to destroy ourselves. This is a unique situation in the history of life on Earth. No other species has ever developed the capacity to cause its own extinction. A deer can't invent a weapon that will wipe out all deer. A shark can't pollute the oceans until they are uninhabitable. But we can. And we have the same brain that figured out the structure of the atom also figured out how to split it, creating nuclear weapons. We now live with the constant, low-level knowledge that we can wipe out human civilization in an afternoon. This is a psychological burden that no previous generation has had to bear. It's a direct consequence of our cleverness. We were smart enough to build the bomb, but are we wise enough not to use it? The jury is still out, and it's not just about nuclear war. Our collective intelligence driving industrial society has led to climate change, mass extinction, and the pollution of our air, water, and soil. We are systematically dismantling the planetary life support systems that we depend on for our own survival. And we know we're doing it. Our brains are smart enough to analyze the data, to build the climate models, to see the disaster coming. But for some reason, we seem unable to stop it. Our short-term biases, our denial, our political squabbles, all driven by those same flawed ancient brains, prevent us from taking the necessary collective action. Yes, we are like a driver who sees a brick wall ahead but cannot take his foot off the accelerator. Our intelligence identified the problem, but our inherent irrationality prevents us from solving it. This is perhaps the greatest paradox and the greatest potential flaw of the human brain. We may be smart enough to understand our problems, but too stupid to fix them. So, is the big brain an evolutionary flaw? It's not a simple yes or no, it's a trade-off that has become a high-stakes gamble. For a long time, the bet paid off. The intelligence of our brains allowed a physically unimpressive ape to survive ice ages, spread across continents, and build civilizations. It gave us art, music, literature, and science. It gave us love and deep social bonds. These things are real and wonderful. The upside has been incredible, but we can't ignore the downside. The physical costs of a fragile, energy-hungry body. The psychological costs of anxiety and self-awareness. The cognitive costs of biases that are dangerously unsuited to our modern world. And the ultimate existential cost of having the power to destroy ourselves. We are now at a point in our history where the flaws are becoming more and more apparent. The very things that made us successful are now the biggest threats to our future. Our tribalism, our short-term thinking, our ability to rationalize destructive behavior. These are not new problems. They are features of our brain's operating system. But they have been amplified by our technology to a planetary scale. Evolution doesn't have a goal. It's not trying to create a perfect species. It's a messy process of trial and error. The big brain was an experiment, a bold, risky move. It gave one species an unprecedented amount of power over its environment. But power is not the same as success. In evolutionary terms, success is simply long-term survival. Dinosaurs were successful. They were around for 150 million years. Sharks are successful. They've been around for 400 million years. Modern humans have been around for about 200,000 years. In the grand scheme of things, we are just a flash in the pan, we are a young species, and the experiment is not over. Perhaps the big brain is like a powerful engine in a car with no brakes and a faulty steering wheel. For a while, on a straight, empty road, the speed is thrilling. You feel powerful, unstoppable. But as the road gets more crowded and the turns get sharper, the very thing that made you fast becomes your greatest liability. We are now entering the sharp turns. The challenges we face today, climate change, global pandemics, artificial intelligence, are all products of our own intelligence. And they will require a level of wisdom, foresight, and cooperation that our flawed, biased brains may not be capable of. The final verdict on the human brain hasn't been written yet. We are living it. We are the evidence. It may be that we learn to manage our own flaws, that we use our intelligence to overcome our primitive instincts, or that we become wise stewards of our own power. That is one possibility. The other is that we will be a short-lived, brilliant, but ultimately self-destructive species. A footnote in Earth's history, an evolutionary experiment that produced a creature too clever for its own good. A species that reached for the stars but burned itself out in the process. The big brain gave us the power to choose our own destiny, but it didn't give us the wisdom to choose correctly. That part is up to us, and it's a flaw in the design that we might not be able to fix. The most human thing of all might be to create problems that even our big brains can't solve.